At 70, I finally said something out loud that I had been avoiding for years. Retirement didn't free me, it broke me. I didn't say it to my kids, I didn't say it to my friends. I didn't even say it to myself for a long time. I just sat with it, day after day, letting the words circle my mind like a thought that refused to land. Because admitting it felt like failure, and men my age, we weren't raised to talk about things like that. The house was quiet when I realized it. Not the peaceful kind of quiet people talk about when they're selling you the idea of retirement. This was a heavier quiet. The kind that presses against your chest when you wake up too early and realize there's nowhere you need to be. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold, morning light slipping through the blinds. The clock on the wall was ticking louder than it ever had before. Tick, tick, tick. No urgency, no deadline, no reason to move. That's when it hit me. For the first time in my life, nobody was waiting for me. No boss, no coworkers, no one depending on me to show up and get things done. And as much as people say retirement is about rest and freedom, what no one tells you is this: when your whole life has been built around being needed, not being needed can feel like disappearing. I didn't cry. Men my age don't cry easily. But something in me folded inward that morning, like a chair that had been leaned on for decades, suddenly left standing alone. People had congratulated me when I retired, slapped me on the back, told me I'd earned it, said things like, "Now you can finally relax," or "Man, you're living the dream now." I smiled, I nodded, I even believed them for a while. But the dream didn't last long. It started with the mornings. I used to wake up before the alarm, already thinking about the day ahead. There was always a sense of direction, even if the work was hard, even if I complained about it. Now I woke up because my body did, not because life asked me to. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, wondering what exactly I was supposed to do with another open day. No one tells you how long a day can feel when it has no shape. I'd shuffle to the window and look out at the street. Same houses, same trees, same people leaving for work. Engines starting, doors closing, life moving forward without me. That's a tough pill to swallow at 70. I told myself it was just an adjustment period. Everybody says that. Give it time. You'll find your rhythm. You'll stay busy. But time has a funny way of stretching when you're alone with your thoughts. Silence has a sound when you live with it long enough. It's the hum of the refrigerator at night, the echo of your own footsteps, the way the TV fills the room but doesn't really keep you company. Some afternoons, I'd turn the television on just to hear a human voice. I wasn't even watching, just letting the noise remind me that the world was still out there. That's when the questions started creeping in. If I'm not working, if I'm not providing, if no one really needs me anymore, then who am I now? That question sat heavy. It followed me from room to room, from morning to night. It didn't come with panic, it came with a slow, steady ache. I had spent decades introducing myself by what I did. My job wasn't just work, it was my identity. It was how I measured my worth, how I justified my place in the world. And when that was gone, I realized something that scared me more than getting older. I didn't know how to exist without it. At 70, you don't expect to feel lost. You expect to feel wise, settled, comfortable in your own skin. That's what the movies show you. That's what the retirement commercials sell. But nobody shows you the man sitting alone at his kitchen table, wondering when his life got so quiet. I didn't talk about it. I kept it to myself, because saying retirement broke me felt ungrateful, like I was complaining about something I was supposed to enjoy. So I smiled when people asked how it was. I said, "Can't complain." That's what men like me say when we don't know how to explain what's really happening inside. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't sad in the dramatic sense. I wasn't depressed in the way people imagine. It was subtler than that. Quieter. Like a slow erosion of purpose. Like waking up one day and realizing the role you played your whole life had quietly been written out of the script. And that realization, that moment when I finally admitted the truth to myself, was the beginning of the hardest chapter of my life. Not because retirement was loud or painful, but because it was silent. And silence has a way of forcing you to face yourself. Before retirement, my days had a backbone. That's the best way I can put it. For more than 40 years, I woke up knowing exactly who I was supposed to be. The alarm clock didn't feel like an enemy back then. It felt like a signal. Time to get moving. Time to show up. Time to be useful. I worked most of my life. Not glamorous work, not the kind people brag about at dinner parties, but honest work, steady work, the kind that keeps a roof over your head and food on the table. The kind where your name might not be remembered forever, but your absence would be noticed if you didn't show up. I liked that. There was comfort in routine. Same coffee mug every morning, same drive, same streets, same traffic lights, same quick nods to people I passed every day. I didn't need excitement, I needed structure, and work gave me that. At the job, I had a role. People came to me with problems. They trusted my judgment. I wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but I was dependable. That mattered to me more than praise ever did. When you've got responsibilities, you don't sit around questioning your purpose. Purpose is baked into your schedule. You don't ask, why am I here, when there's a stack of things that need doing. I was tired most days. My back ached, my knees complained. There were mornings I'd sit on the edge of the bed and take a second before standing up, bracing myself like an old truck warming up in the cold. But even then, there was satisfaction in knowing my effort meant something. Work gave my life edges, boundaries, a reason to push through discomfort. I remember thinking, back then, that retirement would be a reward, a finish line, something you cross and finally exhale. I'd earned my rest, hadn't I? I'd given my time, my energy, my best years. What I didn't realize was how much of myself I had handed over along the way. My job shaped my days, but it also shaped how I saw myself. I was the guy who fixed things, the guy who stayed late, the guy who didn't quit. That identity wrapped around me so tightly that I never questioned it. Looking back now, I see how rarely I slowed down enough to notice anything else. Family dinners were sometimes rushed. Weekends felt short. I told myself I'd make it up later. I told myself there'd be more time once things calmed down. That's one of the lies work whispers to you, that life will start after the next deadline. Still, I don't regret working hard. Not really. There's dignity in showing up day after day. There's pride in knowing you carried your weight. But here's the thing nobody prepares you for. When your entire adult life is organized around one role, losing that role feels like losing your name. I didn't just retire from a job, I retired from an identity. On my last day, they shook my hand, gave me a card, a small cake in the break room, a few speeches that felt kind but distant, like polite goodbyes at a bus station. People meant well, they always do. Someone said, "Don't be a stranger." That made me smile. But deep down, I knew how these things go. Work friendships fade once the shared schedule disappears. I cleaned out my desk, threw away papers that once felt important, packed up a few photos, a mug with a faded logo, 40 years reduced to a cardboard box. Walking out that door felt strange, not dramatic, just quiet. No band playing, no sense of closure, just a regular afternoon that happened to mark the end of something huge. I drove home that day with the radio off. I didn't know why. Maybe I needed to hear my own thoughts, or maybe I was afraid of them. At home, I set the box down and stood there for a while, not sure what to do next. That should have been my first clue. Work had filled my time, but it had also protected me from myself. It kept my mind busy enough that I didn't have to ask hard questions. It gave me a lane to stay in. And now, suddenly, the road was wide open. People say things like you'll finally get to live for yourself, but nobody tells you how unsettling it is when no one tells you where you need to be. Back then, I still believed I was ready. I told myself I'd earned this chapter, that I'd figure it out. I didn't yet understand that the hardest part of retirement isn't the loss of income or the slower pace, it's the loss of being counted on. And that realization was still waiting for me just around the corner. Before I retired, I had a picture in my head of what life was supposed to look like afterward. It was a clean picture, comfortable, almost glossy. I imagined slow mornings that felt earned instead of empty. Coffee on the porch, maybe a newspaper. Sunlight warming my face while the rest of the world rushed past. I thought I'd finally breathe without checking the clock. People around me helped paint that picture. Friends who'd already retired talked about sleeping in, about finally having time. Commercials showed smiling couples walking hand in hand, gray hair glowing in the golden light of some perfect afternoon. I bought into it. I told myself retirement would be freedom. Freedom from schedules, freedom from stress, freedom from answering to anyone else. I didn't stop to ask what I'd be free with. I had plans, at least I thought I did. I'd fix things around the house, organize the garage, take a few trips, read the books I never had time for, maybe pick up a hobby I'd abandoned years ago. Those ideas felt solid when they lived in my head. Reality, though, has a way of softening edges. The first few weeks actually felt pretty good, I won't lie about that. The novelty carried me. I woke up without an alarm and smiled about it. I moved slower, told myself I deserved it. But novelty fades fast when it's not backed by meaning. The projects around the house got done quicker than I expected. The garage didn't need organizing every day. The books didn't fill the hours the way I thought they would. Trips? They're fun when there's something to come back to. Otherwise, they feel like pauses instead of escapes. I realized something uncomfortable early on. Everything I'd imagined retirement to be was built on short-term pleasures, nice things, relaxing things. But none of it answered the deeper question of why I was getting up in the morning. I thought rest would feel good forever. Turns out, rest without purpose starts to feel like waiting. I also believed people would have more time for me, that friends would call, that family would stop by more often now that I was available. That idea didn't come from entitlement, it came from hope. But everyone else was still living their lives. Kids had jobs, grandkids had schools and schedules. Friends were busy or dealing with their own health, their own quiet struggles. The world didn't slow down just because I did. That was a shock. I used to measure my days in tasks completed, in problems solved, in things finished. Retirement took that measuring stick away, and I didn't realize how much I relied on it to feel okay about myself. Days began to blur together. Monday felt like Thursday. Thursday felt like Sunday. Without structure, time lost its shape. I'd catch myself checking the clock for no reason, looking at the calendar even though nothing was written on it, waiting for something that wasn't scheduled. People told me, "You've got all the time in the world now." What they didn't understand is that too much time can feel heavier than too little. When your days are wide open, your thoughts have room to wander, and mine wandered into places I hadn't visited in years. Old regrets, unresolved feelings, questions I'd kept buried under busy schedules. I expected retirement to quiet my mind. Instead, it turned the volume up. I also thought I'd feel proud of reaching this milestone, proud of surviving the grind. And some days, I did. But pride doesn't fill a morning. It doesn't keep you company at lunch. I wasn't miserable, not exactly, but there was a growing sense that something was missing, and I couldn't name it yet. It's strange how disappointment doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it settles in slowly, like dust you don't notice until it's everywhere. Retirement hadn't crushed me overnight. It was quietly unraveling the version of myself I thought I'd be. And I was only just beginning to understand that the life I'd imagined was built on ideas, not on reality. The real test was still ahead. The emptiness didn't arrive all at once. It slipped in quietly. The way fog does, slow enough that you don't notice until the world around you looks unfamiliar. It started with the mornings. I'd wake up early out of habit, my body still trained by decades of alarms. For a few seconds, I'd feel that old urgency, that instinct to get moving. Then I'd remember there was nowhere I needed to be. I'd lie there longer than I should have, listening to the house breathe, the hum of the heater, the distant sound of a car passing by. Small noises that used to fade into the background now felt amplified. Eventually, I'd get up, make coffee, and sit at the table, same chair, same view, same silence. I began to notice how few phone calls came in. At first, I told myself everyone was busy. That was true enough, but days would pass without my phone lighting up. Sometimes I'd check it just to make sure it still worked. When it did ring, it was usually a robocall or someone trying to sell me something I didn't need. The real calls, the ones that mattered, became rare. I didn't blame anyone. Life moves forward. But there was a sting in realizing how invisible you can become once you step out of the daily flow. At the grocery store, I started recognizing the same cashier, the same faces in line. Small talk became my main social interaction. A nod, a smile, a quick comment about the weather. I'd stretch those moments longer than necessary just to feel connected to another human being. Afternoons were the hardest. Mornings still held some structure, coffee, a walk, maybe a chore or two. But afternoons stretched wide and empty, too early for dinner, too late to start something meaningful. I'd turn on the TV again, flipping channels without really watching, game shows, reruns, news that made the world feel louder but no closer. Some days I'd sit there and realize hours had passed without me doing anything worth remembering. That scared me more than I cared to admit. I started taking longer walks, not for exercise, but to fill time. I'd wander the same streets, wave at the same neighbors. Most of them were younger. They were polite, friendly enough, but always in a hurry. I wasn't. There's a loneliness that comes from having too much space in your life, too much time to notice what's missing. I missed being asked for my opinion. Missed someone saying, "Can you help me with this?" Missed feeling like my experience counted for something. At home, I found myself opening old drawers, looking through photos I hadn't touched in years. Pictures of work crews, family gatherings, faces that were older now or gone. I didn't feel dramatic sadness. It was more like a dull ache, a low-level awareness that something essential had slipped away. Evenings felt longer than they ever had before. Dinner was quieter. Sometimes I'd eat standing up like it didn't matter. Afterwards, I'd sit in the living room with the lights low, letting the day fade out without much ceremony. I went to bed earlier, not because I was tired, but because there was nothing left to do. That's when it hit me. Retirement hadn't just taken away my job, it had taken away my rhythm. And without rhythm, life starts to feel thin. I didn't talk about this with anyone. I didn't want to sound ungrateful or weak or like one of those men people quietly worry about. So I carried it myself. But every quiet morning, every empty afternoon, every silent evening was adding weight to a realization I wasn't ready to face yet. Something in me was fading, and I could feel it, even if I didn't yet have the words for it. There's a moment when the truth finally stops circling and lands. For me, it happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Ordinary, forgettable, the kind of day no one marks on a calendar. I was standing in the hardware store, the same one I'd been going to for years. I needed a few small things, nothing urgent, just something to do, really. I recognized the smell right away. Wood, metal, dust. It used to feel familiar, grounding. That day, it felt distant, like a place I no longer belonged. A younger man stood nearby, talking to an employee. He was explaining a problem, asking questions, clearly expecting answers. The employee listened, nodded, offered advice. I realized something then. I used to be the guy people turned to. I used to be the one explaining things, fixing problems, being useful. Now I was just another customer killing time. The thought hit harder than I expected. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't bitterness. It was grief. Grief for a version of myself that no longer existed. I paid for my items and walked back to the car slowly. I sat there with the engine off, hands on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield. And the words came to me, plain and unavoidable. I am no longer needed, not in the way I once was. Work used to give me proof that I mattered, that my presence made a difference. Without it, I was floating, untethered. I thought about all the times I'd complained about being needed too much, about not having time to myself. Funny how quickly you miss the weight once it's gone. At home, I put the bag down and didn't unpack it right away. I just stood there, listening to the quiet settle around me. Nobody was going to call and ask how my day went. Nobody was waiting for me to report back, to solve something, to take responsibility. That realization didn't come with anger. It came with a deep, hollow stillness. I started seeing it everywhere after that, in the way emails stopped, in how meetings were replaced by silence, in the way my experience seemed to have nowhere to go. I wasn't obsolete, I knew that logically, but logic doesn't always win against feeling. I had spent my life being counted on. Now I wasn't sure anyone was counting at all. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling longer than usual. The darkness felt thicker. The house felt larger. I thought about the man I'd been for decades, the worker, the provider, the problem solver. And I wondered what happens when that man has nowhere left to stand. It's a frightening thing to realize that usefulness and worth can get tangled together without you noticing. Retirement didn't erase me overnight, but in that moment I understood something I'd been resisting. The hardest part wasn't the lack of work, it was the loss of being needed. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. After that realization settled in, the days started to feel heavier. Not dramatic, not crushing, just heavier. Like every morning required a little more effort than the one before. I still woke up early, my body didn't know how to do anything else, but now, when I opened my eyes, there was a brief moment of dread before I even moved. Not fear, just a quiet reluctance to start another long, empty day. I'd sit on the edge of the bed and ask myself, what's the point today? And most days, I didn't have a good answer. I tried to stay busy, that's what people recommend. Keep yourself occupied, they say, like it's a switch you can flip. So I cleaned, I reorganized things that didn't need organizing. I fixed small problems around the house just to feel capable. But busy work doesn't satisfy the same way real responsibility does. There's a difference between doing something because it needs to be done and doing something just so the hours pass. Lunch became a formality. I'd eat because it was time, not because I was hungry. Some days I'd forget altogether until my stomach reminded me. Eating alone, day after day, strips the ceremony from it. No conversation, no stories, just chewing in silence. The afternoons dragged the most. That stretch of time between lunch and dinner felt endless. Too late to start anything meaningful, too early to call it a day. I'd sit in my chair, stare out the window, watch the light shift across the floor. I started noticing how quiet my own thoughts could become and how loud they could get when nothing interrupted them. That's when the doubts crept in. Had I done enough with my life? Had I missed things that mattered? Had I traded too much time for work, thinking I'd get it back later? At night, sleep didn't come easily. Not because I wasn't tired, but because there was nothing to be tired from. No mental exhaustion, no sense of completion. I'd lie awake listening to the clock again, counting the seconds like they meant something. Sometimes I'd replay conversations from years ago, moments I wished I'd handled differently, words I never said, apologies I assumed I'd have time for. Other nights, my mind would just drift, untethered, floating from one memory to the next without settling anywhere. I didn't talk to anyone about this. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want concern. I didn't want to be treated like something fragile. So I kept it to myself. But carrying things alone has a cost. Some days I felt irritable for no clear reason. Little things bothered me more than they should have. Other days I felt numb, like I was watching my own life from a distance. I wasn't falling apart, but I wasn't whole either. Retirement had taken away the noise, and in that silence, I was forced to sit with parts of myself I'd ignored for decades. And the truth is, I didn't always like what I found there. When life slows down, memories have more room to breathe. They don't rush in all at once. They arrive one by one, usually when you least expect them, while washing a cup, while folding a shirt, while sitting in a quiet room with nothing else asking for your attention. I began looking back more than I ever had before, not in a nostalgic way, not in a those were the good old days kind of way. It was deeper than that, more honest, less forgiving. I thought about the years I spent coming home tired, about the dinners I half listened through because my mind was still at work, about the times I said later and believed it. later has a way of disappearing. I remembered my kids when they were younger, how fast they grew, how quickly their lives filled with things that didn't need me as much. I told myself I was providing for them, and I was, but I wondered quietly if there were moments when they needed my presence more than my paycheck. Those thoughts didn't come with shame, they came with clarity. At 70, you don't beat yourself up the way you might at 40. You understand that you did the best you could with what you knew at the time. Still, understanding doesn't erase the ache of realizing some doors closed while you were busy walking through others. I thought about friendships that faded, not because of fights or drama, but because life got in the way. Calls not returned, plans postponed. One day you realize it's been years, and reaching out feels awkward, like knocking on a door that might not open. I thought about my parents, too. How I used to promise I'd visit more often. How I assumed there would always be another chance. Time doesn't make those memories kinder, it makes them sharper. Retirement gave me the space to sit with all of this. There was no work to distract me, no deadlines to hide behind, just long stretches of quiet where reflection became unavoidable. Some evenings I'd sit with an old photo album on my lap, turning pages slowly, faces smiling back at me from a time when everything felt urgent and important, back when I believed I had endless time to get things right. What surprised me wasn't the regret itself, it was how gentle it was. Regret at this age isn't loud, it doesn't shout, it doesn't demand punishment. It just sits beside you, like an old friend who knows all your stories and doesn't need to explain them. I didn't wish my life had been different, I wished I had been more present inside it. That realization didn't break me, but it changed the way I saw my past. It softened some memories and made others heavier. It reminded me that a full life isn't just about what you build, but who you share it with. And as I sat there looking backward more often than forward, one question kept coming back. If I can't change what's already past, what do I do with what's left? After all that looking back, there came a point where I couldn't stay there anymore. You can only live in memory for so long before it starts to feel like a room with no windows, comfortable in a way, but stale, heavy. And I knew if I didn't turn my attention forward, even just a little, I was going to sink deeper into myself than I wanted to go. So I started asking a new question. Not who was I, but who can I still be? That question didn't come with answers, not right away. It came with discomfort. Purpose, I learned, doesn't show up just because you're looking for it. You have to make space for it. And after decades of structure being handed to me, I had no idea how to build meaning on my own. I tried a few things. Some of them felt almost laughable. I volunteered once a week at a local place that needed extra hands. Nothing fancy. Folding things, sorting, helping where I could. I told myself it didn't matter how small it was as long as someone else benefited. The first day I felt awkward, like I was pretending. But then someone thanked me. Just a simple, "Appreciate you being here." That stuck with me longer than it should have. I started walking with more intention, not just to pass time, but to notice things. The way the light hit the trees, the sound of kids playing somewhere down the block. Life's still happening, even if I wasn't in the center of it anymore. I called people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some calls went nowhere, some conversations were short. But a few reopened doors I thought were closed for good. I didn't suddenly feel useful again, but I felt connected, and that was something. I realized I had been chasing the same kind of purpose I'd had before, big, obvious, measurable. Retirement wasn't asking for that. It was asking for something quieter. Purpose at this stage of life isn't about being indispensable, it's about being present. I started helping my kids in smaller ways, listening more, offering advice only when it was asked for. Being there without trying to fix everything. That was harder than it sounds. I also learned to sit with myself without trying to escape the silence. Some days that meant just accepting that not every moment needed to be productive, that worth doesn't always come from output. This wasn't a breakthrough moment, there was no sudden clarity, just a gradual shift, a loosening of the grip I had on the man I used to be. I wasn't replacing him, I was making room beside him, and in that space, something steadier began to form. Not excitement, not ambition, but a quiet sense that I still belonged to this world. Acceptance didn't arrive like relief. It came more like understanding, slow, uneventful, almost easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. One morning, I noticed I wasn't fighting the quiet anymore. The house sounded the same as it always had, but it didn't feel as heavy. The silence hadn't changed, I had. I stopped expecting my days to look like they used to. I stopped measuring myself against a past version of me that no longer existed. That comparison had been doing more harm than good. Aging has a way of stripping things down. It takes away illusions. It forces you to decide what really matters once everything extra falls away. I realized I didn't need to feel needed every single day to have value. I didn't need a title or a role to justify my place in the world. That was a hard lesson. Some days were still dull, some nights were still long. Acceptance didn't fix everything, but it softened the edges. I learned to let a day be simple without judging it. A walk, a meal, a conversation. Enough. I also learned to forgive myself for the time I spent working, for the moments I missed, for not knowing then what I know now. Forgiveness at this age isn't about erasing mistakes. It's about making peace with the fact that life is lived forward but understood backward. I still felt lonely sometimes. That didn't disappear. But loneliness stopped feeling like a personal failure and started feeling like part of being human, especially as the circle of people around you naturally shrinks. There's dignity in learning how to sit with that. I stopped rushing to fill every quiet moment. I stopped seeing silence as an enemy. Instead, I let it be a companion, one that asked me to slow down and listen. At 70, acceptance isn't giving up, it's letting go. Letting go of expectations that no longer fit. Letting go of the pressure to prove something. Letting go of the belief that usefulness only comes in one form. I wasn't fixed, but I was steadier. And that was enough to carry me forward. If there's one thing I've learned by 70, it's this. Life doesn't give you lessons in the order you expect. Some of the most important ones arrive late, when you think the hard work is already done. If you're listening to this and you're still working, still in the thick of it, I'm not here to tell you to slow down or quit chasing what you're building. Work has value. Responsibility has dignity. Providing for others matters. But don't confuse busy with meaningful. I spent years thinking I'd have time later. Later to sit, later to listen, later to notice the people I loved without checking the clock. Later feels generous when you're young. It feels fragile when you're old. Make room now, not someday. Now. And if you're already retired or close to it, here's what I wish someone had told me plainly. Retirement doesn't just change your schedule, it changes how you see yourself. You might lose the role that once defined you. You might feel invisible in ways you never did before. That doesn't mean you've lost your worth. It means you're being asked to redefine it. Don't wait for purpose to knock loudly. It rarely does at this age. Purpose shows up in small, quiet forms, in listening, in showing up, in being steady when someone else needs calm. Let go of the idea that your best years have to be behind you. They can be different without being lesser. And don't be ashamed if retirement feels harder than you expected. That struggle doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. We were taught to measure ourselves by what we do. At some point, life asks us to measure ourselves by who we are when the doing slows down. That's not an easy transition, but it's a meaningful one if you let it be. Now, after years of grappling with emptiness, I can sit in my living room and watch the light shift across the floor without feeling restless. I've learned that quiet doesn't have to be heavy. It can be gentle, even comforting. I look back on my life not with regret that weighs me down, but with a calm understanding. The long hours, the missed dinners, the work that once consumed me, they were part of my story. And so is this slower, quieter chapter. One doesn't cancel the other. Both exist, and both have meaning. Some evenings I still feel a twinge of loneliness, but I've learned to let it be without letting it define me. I sit with a cup of tea, glance out the window, and notice the small things. The neighbor's dog trotting along the sidewalk, the distant hum of traffic, the way the wind stirs the trees. Life moves quietly, around me and within me. I've accepted that purpose changes as we age. It doesn't vanish, it shifts. It becomes less about being needed in the ways we once were, and more about presence, connection, and the quiet ways we impact the lives around us. Retirement broke me in some ways, but it also taught me patience, reflection, and acceptance. It taught me to value silence and to understand the depth of my own resilience. I am not the man I was at 50, nor at 60. I am a man who has learned to live slowly, to notice, and to find peace in moments others might overlook. And in that, I've discovered that life, even in its quietest, loneliest chapters, still holds beauty. As I share this story with you, I wonder, have you ever felt that quiet ache of life slowing down? That sense that your role, your purpose, the rhythm you once counted on has shifted or even disappeared? If you have, know this, you are not alone. We all face these moments, whether in retirement or simply in the slower chapters of life. Take a moment today to reflect. What brings you quiet joy? What small ways can you connect, help, or simply be present for the people around you? Sometimes it's a phone call, a shared meal, or just listening. Sometimes it's volunteering, mentoring, or creating something that outlives the day. Every small act matters. If my story resonated with you, I hope it serves as a reminder. Life doesn't end when your schedule empties. Even in silence, even in solitude, there is space to grow, to connect, and to live fully. If you'd like to hear more reflections, gentle stories, and shared experiences of life's quieter chapters, please consider subscribing. Together, we can navigate these moments, one story at a time. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and for taking a moment to be present with me. Life may slow down, but it is still meaningful and still beautiful.